Hello everybody, you're listening to the podcast Summa Divuni, Moving Up. The podcast delves into care leavers' engagement with services. We're exploring some of the challenges, the enablers and some of the outcomes from a range of perspectives, including young people who are care leavers and multi-agency practitioners who have been working with young people. So in this episode, we get to hear a bit more about the research project from the principal investigator, Dr Davies from Bangor University, and Dr Diane Seddon, also from Bangor University, who's been involved in the study from its inception. So, in particular, we want to find out why and how this research came about, and we'll find out why research with young people is important and the methodology and approaches used in the research. So, first of all, some introductions. Ceryl, could you tell us about yourself and how you came to the project?
Hello, Pau. I'm Ceryl Davies. I'm a researcher and lecturer based at Bangor University. I'm very much a social worker and worked across social care services for just over 20 years across North Wales, working to support children, young people, and also adults and families as a whole. So I'm really passionate about really gathering the voices and understanding the experiences of people accessing social care support so that we understand what works well and also what needs to be developed further. So for me, my kind of drive and passion for this research was looking at kind of why do people want to be involved with services? Why do they make a choice to engage? And also what makes people disengage or decide that they don't want to be involved with services. And kind of, I don't like that word disengagement because it's quite a negative word, but it's around understanding how services can take more responsibilities around really promoting access to support and services for people.
Great, thank you, Ceryl. And Diane, could you tell us a bit about yourself and what brought you to the project?
Yeah, thank you, Louise. So my name's Diane Seddon and I'm a reader in social care in the School of Health Sciences at Bangor University, where I've worked for all the last 20 odd years. And I have a particular interest in assessment, support planning, and helping people across the age spectrum to achieve those things that matter most to them. And I think this project is a really good example of how we can actually move that agenda on. I also have a real interest in participatory approaches to research and how we can best involve people with living experience, so the real experts by experience in all stages of the research process, from the generation of a research idea to overseeing the plan of investigation and the research study as it progresses, to being able to jointly share and disseminate findings from research with people, and also help support the utilisation of that research evidence in policy and practice where it can make a real difference to people's everyday lives. So that's a little bit about me.
That's great, thanks Diane. And just whilst we're on introductions, I am Louise Prendergrast. I'm based at the School of Health Sciences at Bangor University, and I've been involved in this research as a research officer from the beginning. So, thank you both. Ceryl, could you tell me a bit about why you think research with young people is important? What brought you to the research questions and how was it developed?
Okay, yeah, no, that's a really good starting point. Thanks, Louise. For me, this was built really from the start as a research project in partnership with both services and local authorities across North Wales, and also with a diverse group of young people. And what the young people and the young adults who had experienced care across Wales were saying was services really need to understand why we want to work with services, and also they need to understand possibly why we make choices not to work with services. So from that outset, this was a research gap, a policy and a practice gap that was identified from both professional services, so local authority services, including social workers and personal advisors within care leaver services, but also young people. And for me, then also, I wanted to kind of explore their everyday kind of, as Diane was mentioning, that everyday experiences that people have around services. How does it feel and look like for them, and what would be their suggestions and recommendations around how services can be developed and also potentially improved. So it was around kind of looking at that information that could then inform research development and also potentially practice and policy development, but starting from the outset of building that research question, building that research proposal with young people and services as key partners and key stakeholders as part of that project from the outset.
And I think that is really important, and I think this project is a really good example of how we can implement into practice the national standards for public involvement in health and care research, and in particular standards that relate to inclusive opportunities that try to capture the diversity of younger people's experiences, and also the standard about working together to try to affect positive changes for younger people.
And I think also there's this sense, and I hate this term, that people are hard to reach.
Yeah.
I don't think that's appropriate. That's putting onus on populations, and it's quite a judgmental statement. For me, it's making people visible, and it's the responsibilities of researchers to give voice and to be inclusive of citizens and kind of key individuals who are sometimes have unheard voices within our communities. So it's giving voice and including people across the board as much as you possibly can, and not kind of going into this kind of hole of seeing people as being hard to reach. So it's for me, the drive of this research project was, as Diane was mentioning, focusing on those really good practice standards around involving people in research about and for them, and really promoting that more inclusive voices across young people services for care leavers across Wales.
And I would agree, Carol, and concur. I really dislike the term hard to reach. And as one person who's involved in another project recently pointed out to me, we're not hard to reach. It's you as researchers that are looking in the wrong places or using the wrong methods to try to reach and engage with us. So yeah, it does highlight really important, an important point about the language that we use to engage and participate with people.
Yeah, definitely. And for any researchers out there, an excellent resource for really promoting equality, diversity, inclusion in research is the NIHR toolkit around equality, diversity, inclusion, their EDI toolkit, which really focuses on promoting best practice in research around how do you include as much as possible diverse voices in your research, and also that is the responsibility of the researcher. How do you promote your project in the most visible and diverse way?
Mm-hmm. And I would concur with that, and also add another really useful resource is the PIRIT tool that was developed by the Wales Cancer Research Unit to help people plan, deliver, and crucially also evaluate the impact of their engagement work. So that's another really useful and helpful tool to guide participatory approaches.
So, were people keen to get involved from the outset? Was there like a catalyst? There's something that started off and then it sort of snowballed or blossomed from there. Could you talk us through how this got off the ground?
Of course. This was driven by the amazing passion of practitioners within a local authority in North Wales. And I had quite a few brainstorming sessions with them to really develop the research question and the research focus. We then kind of reached out to a broad range of care leavers across their local authority area, and the response was positive. This was built also during and during the COVID era of going in and out of national lockdown. So to kind of really look at being as inclusive as we could, to look at diverse voices, we offered different sessions online and over the phone to try and gather people's views around the research question, the aims and objectives of the research, the approach, and also the topic as a whole. Kind of asking people, do you think this research project is needed and do you think it's important? And as part of that process, I worked in partnership with different stakeholders from one local authority in North Wales and also 14 young people who were experiencing care or aftercare within this local authority area. So to answer your question, there was a really good response to really that initial idea of being involved at that very initial stage of the research project, building that research project with us and really defining the research focus and the aims and objectives. And we had that response around really engaging online through Zoom, on the phone, using different methods, but also using different support also to promote a more inclusive approach to access different voices. So a lot of the young people that I engaged with at that initial stage had different needs. So I did adapt the way that we were accessing different views to really respond to different learning styles, different needs, and also maybe different abilities as well.
So I guess that highlights the importance of being really flexible and innovative in terms of how you seek to engage with people at the beginning of a potential research project. But Ceryl, if I may, can I ask you a question in terms of what impact did that initial engagement have? How did it shape the research and the path that you eventually took? Because I know too often as researchers, we say that we've involved people at the research development stage, but often, if we're honest, that's quite a tick box exercise, isn't it? And it's really important that we as researchers evidence the difference that's had right at the outset.
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant question. It very much shaped the project at that really kind of initial stage. So I completed the kind of consultation sessions with one of the service managers from the local authority area and the senior manager, and also the personal advisors were also involved. So there was different voices, different experiences. And for me, it kind of shone the light around the research gap, the need to include young people in the research, but also that actually, even though we talk about engagement, for me, it wasn't clear what we actually meant from engagement. And the spotlight on that was shone by the young people. What does engagement look like? How we sometimes use that word very fluidly with other different terms like participation, consultation, co-production, engagement. What do we actually mean? But also a lot of the young people were shining around their pathway or their experiences through services, and we're really saying what kind of means that we want to stay on that path and what means that we diverge off that path. And a lot of the young people were saying, um, I wanted to engage with services, but some of my peers didn't. And they had the question around, they wanted to understand what that changing point was. So from the outset, really, it really influenced the research proposal, the proposal that we were putting forward to the funder, and also how we changed that proposal. And we went through the draft proposal with the stakeholders, the professional stakeholders, and the young people who were stakeholders, and changed the proposal to reflect their views. And it did really make me think about the topic and the question differently. And I kind of learned differently and kind of understood that we really needed to focus the research project really on focusing on the barriers potentially, but also the other side, the enablers, to look at that balanced approach throughout really.
And I think that's really important because too often research focuses on the things that are going wrong and the barriers, and we lose sight of the things that are working well and the opportunity to think about, well, what makes those things well and how can we transfer that learning across different service service setting. So focusing on what's going well and the opportunities is really important.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, you know, the discussion with both the young people and the practitioners was very much wanting that strength-based approach and those kind of very collaborative conversations around what does the services look like. And the young people who I engaged with from the outset were very open around what they thought was really positive and what they thought potentially was some of their turning points, either on a positive way or on a more kind of reflective trajectory around making them, you know, engage with services differently. So yeah, it was having that both the focus on both sides, enablers and also the barriers.
Can I just ask another question, if I may? And that's, what are the plans for capturing the impact over the life course of the project? So we've talked very much about the impact in terms of the initial proposal development. We know that young people have been actively involved throughout the course of the project. So how then do we best capture the impact over the life course of the project?
Yeah, 100%. I think right from the initial stages, young people and practitioners have been involved as key stakeholders. That's continued with the project steering group and also the project advisory group. So everything that we've used as part of the project. So, for example, if we've designed a questionnaire, if we've designed interview questions, we've always checked and kind of consulted and co-produced every tool in partnership with the project steering group and the project advisory group. And we've published a scoping literature review, and as part of the publication and the development of that paper, we also shared the paper, the findings, the ideas with the young people as part of the project advisory group and also as part of the steering group. So it's continued as a golden thread right from the start of the project through to the development of the methodology, the methods, the tools, and also the findings and the analysis. The aim now, looking at the life course right now towards heading towards the end of the project, when we'll be looking at other kind of key outputs from the project, when we'll be looking at that overall analysis and the findings, we'll continue that kind of co-production with young people and also stakeholders. And also, very excitingly, we've got a project symposium coming up on the 11th of September, and that again will involve everyone. You know, researchers, policymakers, practitioners, young people who have experience, who have living experiences of being in care and then being out of care will be involved as part of that project. And we will, you know, post project end date, we will also continue to look at developing resources and outputs, which again will engage with citizens accessing services and stakeholders to develop those outputs. We've also produced a practice focused toolkit as well as part of the project. And that has very much been built on the evidence that we've gathered from this research and then been co-produced with A, young people, and B, professional stakeholders. And the aim then is to continue to use that toolkit post this project, and we have trained practitioners across Wales now to be able to use that toolkit in practice. So I think the answer in simple terms is across different levels, we will continue to develop this project in partnership with a broad range of key stakeholders.
And really good that the symposium provides an opportunity for all those key stakeholders to meet at the same time, isn't it? Because all too often when we share our research findings, we do that in silo, don't we? We talk to one group of practitioners, we talk to a different group of policymakers, but very rarely do we bring big people together to have those discussions. So that's really, really good, really positive.
100%. And for anyone out there who's listening to this podcast before the 11th of September, do please get in touch if you are interested in attending the event in Bangor University. It is a live event, face-to-face event with quite a diverse agenda, focusing as we have throughout this project on research impact, on practice impact, on everyday impact and policy impact. So any interest, do get involved. And also, if you're listening to this podcast post September the 11th, when the symposium is live, do have a look at some of the recording and the podcast recording from that event as well. So that's me kind of plugging the events there, Louise.
I've just got a question I'd like to ask you about. You talk about, Diane, you mentioned the PIRIT toolkit, and Carol, you mentioned the NIHR Equality, Diversity and Inclusivity tool. And so you're talking about these things as if they're sort of relatively new. Do you think there's been a lot of research that has been doing to populations rather than doing with? And do you think we need to, a new thing is like giving something back? Because Carol, you spoke about like a toolkit. So that is like maybe giving something back to the practitioners who've been involved in research. So has this moved then? Has research moved on from doing to doing with?
In my view, I think across health and social care research as a discipline, I think it's very much something that's been developing in partnership with citizens and with services over the last few years. So I do think it's something that's growing as part of a golden theme throughout the research conducted in the field of health and social care. Talking from my background in research in social care and social work research, I think it is very much inclusive, value-based, strength-based, and very much informed by different experiences and different voices. So I think it's something that is generally done really well in social work research, and that kind of follows the discipline of social work, which is really value-based and person-centered and relationship-based. So I think it kind of comes naturally as part of our research, in particular across social work, but also in health. I think in other areas, though, I think it's still underdeveloped in other disciplines. So I think in other area of research, it's not as kind of seen as something natural or something that becomes kind of that natural part of a research project that you do, not because it's tokenistic or because it's a tick box. It's because that's how you do good research with and for people. So that's my view. I don't know if Diane has a different
No,
one.
I would agree, and I think there is a much stronger emphasis now than, say, there was 5, maybe 10 years ago on working together to understand the outcomes, for in this case, of what's important to younger people and what help and support people might need to actually achieve those outcomes. So I think we have seen a shift. I would say that there is a very strong commitment to participatory approaches, co-creative research, co-productive research, whatever you want to label it. But I think also we must recognise that whilst there is that commitment in principle, sometimes actually translating that into practice can be quite challenging, both for researchers, for research funding organisations, in terms of understanding the time that takes up to build relationships with people. That it's not a resource neutral thing. It actually costs quite a lot of money to effectively engage with people over time, build up those relationships, and ensure that what you're doing is not tokenistic, but that it's actually meaningful. So I think that there are improvements, but there are challenges as well. And I think also we talk about the importance of co-creation and participatory approaches, but we have very limited evidence or very limited understanding of the impact of those. So I think as researchers, it's really important going forward that we think about how best can we capture the impact of people's involvement, and crucially evidence that involvement in our research outputs, because I don't think we're very good at doing that at the moment.
Why, Diane, do you think we have a limited understanding of the impact of involvement with research? Is it because it's a relatively new concept of co-production of research, or is it because we just don't have the tools available, or because projects are perhaps short-lived?
I think partly until very recently we've not had the tools to do that, but I think now that we have the national standards, which are benchmarks that we can work towards, that is helpful, and we can evaluate our activity against those benchmarks. And the PIRIT tool provides us with an excellent tool to take stock of our involvement and engagement activities. But yeah, Louise, you're right. The research life cycle is very short, and often people then move on to other research projects that are funded. And that time for reflection and taking stock at the end of a project is often difficult. It's difficult to find that time to reflect.
Carol, do you have any recommendations that you'd make in terms of reflecting on sort of capturing impact?
So my recommendations would focus on that to make sure that you're getting the full impact. I think that stakeholders, professional stakeholders, policy stakeholders, and also stakeholders with experiences of the topic that you're exploring should be involved from the outset and then throughout the project. So it should be seen as a golden thread throughout your project, not something that happens towards the beginning when you're building your research proposal, or then towards the end. That involvement should be offered flexibly and in a needs-led way from the outset throughout. So that would be my kind of key focus and around capturing impact. It needs to be genuine and it needs to be a golden thread throughout. But as Diane rightly mentioned before, it is a challenge. It's not easy. It's something that needs to be thought through. It's something that needs resources and needs to be costed appropriately. It's something that you need to give time and effort to maintain, and that shouldn't be undervalued in a way. It should be acknowledged that that is a key part of the research project that will need kind of dedication, that will need resource, and will need appropriate time allocation to avoid kind of any form of tokenism, and also to look at it being genuine and planned and delivered to achieve that maximum impact as much as you can.
Thank you. How important is it to offer sort of incentives or remuneration for people participating in research? For example, we have the toolkit that you spoke about, but giving payments or vouchers to participants?
For me, I think that is something that's important, and that is something very much that should be a choice offered to people, giving you their time and also participating in the research. You know, we're asking people to be advisors often on our research projects, to advise us on tools, to advise us on toolkits, to provide us with insight into their knowledge and experiences. And there should be that offer of remuneration. Oh, that word that I often kind of quite say properly, but we should we should offer that kind of payment for expenses, and we also should offer that kind of acknowledgement and appreciation and payment for their time. That is my view, but there should be that choice.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely concur with that. I think it's vitally important. But again, I think there's a lot of work to be done there in terms of payments and the bureaucracy that sits behind that. In particular, work with the HMRC and also work with universities around their eligibility to work checks, etc., that are often very prohibitive and mean that we often end up just giving tokenistic, and I'm not saying in the case of this particular project, but often we end up giving tokenistic vouchers to people rather than properly remunerating them for their time and their involvement. So I think it's really important area going forward that we address some of those barriers to effectively remunerating and recognising people for what is a vital contribution that they make to particular research projects.
I agree with you, Diane. I think there is some barriers at the moment around payment, hence why we tend to use vouchers. And I think that sometimes can undervalue, if you like, the true participation, you know, because we can't offer monetary payment as a wage. But that's something I think that needs to be explored and developed in the future, around how can we truly value and have people with living experiences of everyday topics that we want to research across health and social care. How can we really truly involve them as co-applicants and co-investigators as part of the research project, which means that their contribution is completely valued as everyone else as part of that research team. And I think that's a step that we need to kind of explore and take forward in the future. But I think at the moment, as Diane mentioned, there are some barriers there around making those payments meaningful beyond kind of providing people with vouchers. However, don't get me wrong, I'm not undervaluing the benefit of providing people with vouchers. I think that is important and we should continue to do that. But as we're developing more meaningful involvement and co production, and that role of people with living experiences becoming co applicants, I think this is something that needs to stay as part of the debate and something that we need to continue to kind of review moving forward in the future.
Looking at some of the practitioners, involving practitioners in research, do you see any challenges there where you know that many people are they may be under pressure, they may be burnt out within their working roles? Are there any challenges that you've seen and how have you overcome these?
So, without a shadow of a doubt, both health and social care and also related disciplines, so for example, education, are very much post COVID under substantial pressures. Workload has increased, staff retention is a challenge across, in particular, social care and also in health. And I think recruitment is also a challenge. So there needs to be that acknowledgement of real world terms. Working in practice at the moment, frontline practice is something that is a real challenge for services. So I think that needs to be acknowledged. There needs to be that real world approach to conducting research. And I think it needs to be conducted in a way in partnership with services so that you're listening, you're understanding, and you're acknowledging the challenges and you're being flexible as much as you can to some of those challenges. So you need to kind of look at what will work best when you're engaging and researching with services. And as researchers, we need to adapt, we need to listen, and we need to respond to some of those challenges so that our research environment is kind of shaped in a way that is as flexible as it can be and as responsive to different needs of different potential participants. So, without a shadow of a doubt, it's a challenge. And I've seen also some uses and some limitations post COVID. Initially, when we moved to do a lot more research online or over the phone, I thought it would be a real challenge, but actually, it's proved to be a potential opportunity because I think more services, more practitioners, more professionals, and also citizens accessing services feel that it's more flexible and it's more kind of more value for time. So I've seen kind of research participant response rates improve with more flexible approaches using, for example, Teams or Zoom or using the phone to provide different kind of ways of communicating and including people in research. So that would be my kind of suggestion, and that is my experience.
Yeah, I guess my observation is that practitioners really do want to be involved in research. They want to contribute, particularly when they can see that it's research that has the potential to make a real difference to people's everyday lives, that it's not academics up in their ivory towers theorising about X, Y, and Z, but it's a project that has real potential and important implications for people. One challenge I found is that whilst practitioners, on the one hand, are very keen to become involved in research and to shape research proposals, they also feel conflicted because they're worried if they are seen to engage with research, does that mean people are going to interpret as, well, you've got a lot of time on your hands, so I'm going to give you X more cases and increase your caseload. So I think there is some worry and tension there about being seen to engage in research and the implications that might have. So I think there is work to be done at a strategic and managerial level to reiterate the importance of being involved in research and subsequently that supporting practice development.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also, just building on Diane's point, I think there's also a disparity between research in health in comparison with research in social care or social work. I think it's seen as something quite crucial and quite key in health, and it's acknowledged with regards to people's time actually, and people's time off duty to be able to contribute to health. Whereas I think in social care and in social work, I think it's seen as something on top of people's everyday, and that time allowance is not there in social work or social care to allow social care practitioners or social work practitioners to contribute or to be involved in research where it's acknowledged as a key part of their role and it's acknowledged as part of their time and part of their workload. So for me, moving forward, and something I've been advocating for many years, there needs to be better parity between health and social care moving forward around understanding we need to build evidence-based practice in social work and in social care as we do in health, but it needs to have the same level of importance and acknowledgement in social care as it does in health. So there needs to be that parity between health and social care, which I don't think is there at the moment.
I don't think they are. And I was just reminded then of a comment from a trainee social worker a few years ago who said to me, Diane, I don't understand why I need to do research. I'm going to be a social worker. I'm going to be a doer, not a thinker. And I just said, well, hopefully by engaging in this research process, it'll have you thinking about what you do. And I think that attitude and that approach still persists, unfortunately, within social care, whereas in healthcare, they are much more further forward in their thinking about research and how those research findings can ultimately shape their clinical practice.
Definitely. And I think some of that potentially stems from social care as a whole being very much seen as a secondary partner to health. Whereas I think what we learned, and what I certainly learned working across social care services during COVID, is that social care is very much a key player and a key partner and should be seen at the same level with the same level of kind of acknowledgement and support as health. It is very much a partnership between health and social care, and it should be more of an equal partnership moving forward. So for me, that would be the key kind of learning and the key aspect that needs to be developed moving forward.
Do you think perhaps there needs to be improved visibility of where research has made a difference? We see lots of sort of innovations in health, but in health and social care, do you think there needs to be improvements in flying the flag and saying this has made a difference, this research?
I think with research, when we're looking at research across health and social care, the focus still tends to be on health research. There's lots of different factors that influence that, but I think moving forward, that balance needs to be refocused, where that focuses on both health and also social care research. It shouldn't be a competition between either or. It should be an equal drive, an equal focus, because the integration between those services is continually developing and should be developed between health and social care services within, say, inpatient services within hospitals, and then that transfer into community services. So for me, that should be that drive in focusing on building research, building evidence in both disciplines, but together and in an integrated way. And from a social care perspective, it should become more important. It should become a golden thread, and it should become more visible. I don't think the importance of research, as Diane was mentioned, is there as driven as part of a golden value in social care or in social work research, but it needs to be. It is very important. And all the tools, all the assessment, all that we develop across social care is built from research evidence. And that needs to be driven forward now in the future, just to raise that focus around evidence-based practice across social care and that importance of research across social care, and also including stakeholders, including services, and including citizens in research across social care services.
Mm-hmm. And I would echo what Ceryl has said. And I think as social care researchers, we're not very good at showcasing the impact that our research has had, and we kind of hide our lights under a bushel, don't we? We don't showcase the impact that our work has had in the same way that health services researchers and health colleagues do. So I think we have got lessons to learn. But increasingly, we can see that there are frameworks to support the uptake of evidence into practice. So I'm thinking of work by colleagues here in Wales with the Developing Evidence Enriched Practice, the DEEP initiative. So in terms of going forward, that will hopefully help social care researchers to be more confident about the approaches that they can take, and more confident in terms of being able to showcase the impact that their research has had on policy and on practice.
100%. And I think building on what Diane's just mentioned, one of the key aims that I want to achieve as a researcher over the next year is really A, promoting social care and social work research. B, I want to look at how can we improve how we measure outcomes in social care research. I think that's an area that really needs to be developed, and something that our colleagues in health do very, very well. And I think also building on that focus on how we measure outcomes, I'm really keen with my identity based within the Centre for Health Economics Research in Bangor. I really want to develop a focus on social care economics and how we begin to measure cost, value, outcomes, and also opportunity costs in social care. So for me, that is some of the drive I want to achieve as part of my research goals moving forward.
So we're coming to the end of this now. Now, you've spoken about the importance of flexibility, the importance of involving stakeholders and populations who will be impacted by your research prior to the research starting, and then afterwards as well, so that you could potentially measure the impacts, a sort of top and tail. So thinking about going forward, just as a final question, could you tell me any advice that you might give to people thinking about conducting research with more sensitive populations, or those whose voices are perhaps not represented in research?
I mean, one of my top tips would be to think very carefully about the language you use to describe people who engage with services, that words matter and that they matter a lot. And too often, when we talk about involvement, we talk about PPI, public involvement, or we talk about service users. And some of the terms that we use to describe people are actually very derogatory and have the potential to cause offence. So one of the things that I'm very, very mindful of when working, in my case primarily with older adults and people living with dementia, is that we use appropriate terms to engage with people, and we're very, very careful of the language that we use and how that might be interpreted by people. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with Diane's views. And I would say that it's really important that we listen, that we're approachable, that we understand, and that we're flexible. And we understand that sometimes we need to adapt the approach to meet people's different choices, life circumstances, needs, routines, some of the everyday things that people come across that we need to be adaptive and understanding to. So it's being accessible and it's being real world as researchers, I think.
And it's not being arrogant when you're challenged by people as well. I mean, as academics, we spend a lot of our time being challenged by our academic peers, and we think nothing of that, do we? But also being challenged by members of the public with living experience, and be prepared to be challenged, and be prepared to change things appropriately, and not to be arrogant.
100%. And it's really interesting. One of the key projects I did around co-production with young people was a few years ago, but I learned so much. And the key things that I learned was, with the best will of the world, I am not a teenager now. I don't know what it is to be a teenager in 2024. So I was looking at research around dating norms with young people. And to be honest with you, I had two groups of advisors and they were invaluable. I changed most of the things within the project because how I understood dating now was completely different to my experiences of dating 30 years ago. So for me, is, as Diane was saying, not being arrogant, because we don't know it all. We don't have all the life experiences. No one has all the answers. So you have to engage with different voices, different experiences to shape what you're building, to make it as kind of diverse, as inclusive, and to make it the best that you can. For me, you want the best, don't you? If you're doing research, you want the best tools, you want the best approach, you want the best impact. So to do that, you need to kind of engage and gather the views of as many people as you can. And you learn and you change and you have those moments thinking, oh, I would never have thought of that. And I had when I work with young people, I always think, oh, I didn't think about that in that way. So it's always that kind of reshaping the way that you reflect and the way that you think about the approach to the research project.
Yeah, so the key is it's not just about working together, it's about learning together as well.
That's great. Diane, Ceryl, thank you so much for your contributions today. I think we've learned an awful lot. We're always learning. We need to learn with people. So, Ceryl, finally, the fourth podcast. Do you want to have a brief say about what the fourth podcast will be at the symposium?
So we are very excited about the symposium, which will be held at Bangor University in North Wales on the 11th of September. And there will be a live podcast reporting from the symposium. So keep an eye out for that podcast. And as I've mentioned, if you're listening to this podcast before the 11th of September 2024, please do get in touch. If you wish to attend, then you're more than welcome to attend as part of the symposium day. Thank you very much, Louise, for facilitating this conversation today. This research is led by Bangor University in partnership with our fantastic partners from GISTA, Gwynedd County Council, Conwy County Borough Council, Ynys Môn Council and Torfaen Council. And we would like to thank Health and Care Research Wales for funding this all-Wales research.